Welcome back once again. Today we'll be breaking down and recapping the entire Season 3 of Tulsa King. If you haven't watched the first two seasons, their links will be in my description. So without further ado, enjoy the breakdown and recap. Tulsa King Season 3 continues as Dwight wakes up due to the bright lights of his interrogation cell. A special agent named Musso claims that he had attempted to build a case against Dwight and the Inverness crime family through his informant Ripple, whom Dwight killed 25 years ago. Dwight asserts that it was a mercy kill, as the man was burning up while chained to a radiator. But Musso dismisses his explanation and instead blames him for killing Ripple before he could reveal information to the law enforcement. Furthermore, Musso claims to know about Dwight's criminal business in Tulsa and is even aware of all his associates, so he threatens a crackdown on them unless Dwight starts working for him, to which Dwight reluctantly agrees.
Belongs to me. So when I call, you answer.
Dwight is dropped off in front of his house, where his bodyguard Bigfoot inquires about his disappearance, but Dwight avoids answering. Subsequently, Dwight meets with Margaret and apologizes for the inconvenience she faced due to the FBI raid at her house that targeted him. He explains that federal agents are after him, threatening everyone in his life, so he must distance himself for her safety. Later, on his way back with Bigfoot, he gets a call from a New York mob boss, Ray Renzetti, who coaxes him to schedule a meeting with him in New York. There, Dwight sits with his sister Joanne at a sidewalk cafe, and as the procession of the San Gennaro festival passes by, he explains to his two grandkids, Cody and Ryan, that San Gennaro was wrongly executed by the Roman emperor, who was jealous of his ability to pacify the volcano of Mount Vesuvius, so they should never volunteer for any good deeds. Just then, his associate Goody arrives and guides Dwight to the apartment where the meeting with Ray is scheduled. Once there, Dwight is instructed to enter the apartment alone, with Bigfoot and Goody waiting outside. Inside, Ray welcomes Dwight as he prepares a gift for his grandkid's birthday, and then offers him a seat at the table, where he brings up his demand for a share in Dwight's business in Tulsa in return for establishing his family in New York. Dwight rejects Ray's offer despite his implicit threats and exits the apartment in anger. Once he is outside, he tells Goody that Ray basically tried to send him into retirement by offering him control of his own area, so he refused. Back in Tulsa, Dwight's associate Mitch unsuccessfully tries to sell a car to an old woman in his newly purchased car dealership, when his ex-girlfriend Cleo Montague shows up to surprise him. Later, as Cleo and Mitch catch up with each other in the dealership garage, Cleo reveals that she returned to Tulsa to help out her father, whose distillery business is facing a financial crisis, and it's on the verge of being sold. Mitch guesses that the local businessman Jeremiah Dunmeyer must be targeting the distillery for purchase, which she confirms before leaving and invites him to their yard sale. Meanwhile, Dwight goes to the Bread to Buck saloon for a drink, and Margaret also joins him. She questions why he has abandoned her, which Dwight attributes to the federal agents after him, as he thinks they would make him do bad things and considers it best to stay away from her. However, she rejects the idea entirely and gives Dwight a badge of stars as a gift, making it clear that she plans to stay beside him. As she leaves, Mitch arrives complaining to Dwight about his car dealership business, which he does not like, and informs him about the business opportunity of buying the failing distillery, owned by Cleo's father. He offers him liquor from the distillery, which Dwight loves, prompting him to enter the race to buy the business, while risking a rivalry with Jeremiah Dunmeyer, who has set his eyes on it. Elsewhere, at Dwight's marijuana dispensary called the Even Higher Plane, Joanne arrives and informs Bodie of his task to drop off cash profits to the Kansas City mob. She instructs him to take his colleague Grace with him and also pick up Dwight's driver Tyson on the way. However, Bodie isn't enthusiastic to go on the road trip, as he explains to Grace that one of the Kansas City gangsters killed his friend Jimmy. Meanwhile, Dwight is accompanied by Mitch and Goody and arrives at Cleo's yard sale, where Dwight asks her if he can see her father. Grace and Bodie arrive to pick up Tyson from his house, who disapproves of Bodie's electric vehicle, but he is given no choice. Back at the Montague estate, Dwight tries to bargain for the distillery with Theodore Montague, but he is reluctant to sell the distillery to a felon and claims to have already made an informal deal with Jeremiah Dunmeyer, despite Dwight doubling Dunmeyer's pricing. At the yard sale, Jeremiah's son Cole Dunmeyer arrives and tries to bully Mitch and Cleo. On the other side, Bodie, Grace, and Tyson are forced to make a stop at a charging station on their way to Kansas City, so Tyson informs the Kansas City mob boss, Bill Bevilacqua, about the change of plans through Dwight. Outside the Montague mansion, Dwight informs his associates that Montague is reluctant to sell the distillery due to Jeremiah Dunmeyer's involvement, which Goody sees as a blessing in disguise, as their purchase of the distillery might make the New York mob fear their growing power and retaliate in return. On the other hand, as Tyson and the others wait at the charging station, 3 Kansas City mobsters arrive in a car and demand the money. When they are handed over the money bag, it turns out to be full of comics instead of cash. The mobsters feel that they are being threatened, but Bodie explains that he accidentally grabbed the wrong bag and asks them to come along to Tulsa to get their cash. However, the leading mobsters decide to instead take Bodie along with them to the Even Higher Plane for the money, while Grace and Tyson are held at gunpoint by the other 2 mobsters. Once there, Bodie fills up the bag with money from the safe in the marijuana dispensary, and he suddenly takes the mobster at gunpoint. He then beats him up and makes him beg for his life before letting him go. saying this was payback for killing his best friend Jimmy. At night, Dwight, Joanne, and Margaret are busy trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle when he gets a call from Bevilacqua, who complains about his man being treated unfairly by Bodhi. However, Dwight sides with Bodhi and claims that it is part of his grieving process before he cuts the call. The next day, Dwight convinces Montague with the help of Cleo and Mitch that he should sell the distillery to him rather than Jeremiah Dunmire, whose offer is exploitative. Montague is convinced, but he fears Dunmire's reaction and doubts if Dwight can get a license with his criminal record, but Dwight assures him that he can overcome both problems. Later that night, Cole informs Jeremiah about the deal between Dwight and Montague, whereas Dwight gets a call from Musso alerting him to be ready for further orders in the next few days, and to inform him that he knows about Dwight's deal with Montague. Moments later, Jeremiah Dunmire arrives at the Montague's house and demands to know why he made a deal with Dwight when they had already reached an agreement. Montague claims Dwight made him a better offer than Jeremiah's exploitative one, so he changed his mind. Jeremiah accepts this and leaves the place, but outside he orders his men to attack the house. The men break into the house and beat up Montague while their leader Cole casually observes the violence. The place is then set on fire, and Jeremiah Dunmire watches from a safe distance. In the morning, Dwight and his crew observe the burned-down Montague mansion in shock, and Dwight wonders if Cole Dunmire alone carried out the arson. But Mitch asserts that Cole does not do anything without the orders of his father, so the Dixie Mafia headed by Jeremiah Dunmire must have supported the attack. Later, when Dwight attends the funeral of Theodore Montague, Goody informs him that their associate Armand is unresponsive and has recently joined an Alcoholics Anonymous support group where he might spill the secrets of their criminal business. So Dwight instructs him to check on Armand to avoid any issues. When Dwight and Margaret are paying their respect to Montague, Jeremiah and Cole Dunmire also arrive, prompting Dwight to confront Jeremiah and warn him that he would not be able to burn his house down so easily. However, Jeremiah is unfazed and offers Dwight thrice the price that he paid for the distillery. Dwight flatly refuses the offer, and just then Cleo arrives and attacks Cole for daring to attend the funeral. But when Cole tries to subdue her, Mitch throws him to the ground while Cole threatens to kill him. The next morning, Joanne reveals that the distillery has made no profits for the past 10 years, so they should take Dunmire's offer on it. However, Dwight thinks that the distillery must be of higher value if Dunmire is willing to pay so much for it. Moments later, when Dwight's crew revisits the mansion, they are informed by Cleo that the insurance examiner attributed the fire purely to an accident, so she will receive no insurance. She claims that Dunmire is behind all this and has a tight grip on the whole county, making Dwight question why Dunmire was so interested in a failing distillery. Cleo answers his question by leading them all to a hidden storage area in their cemetery that has 200 barrels full of 50-year-old vintage bourbon, secretly produced and stashed away by her father and grandfather. Dwight reckons it's worth around $150 million, so the crew visits the distillery next and finds it in a sorry state. Dwight then assigns Tyson to convince his father to fix the plumbing, and he decides to approach the local distributor Walden Eustace as an alternative to the exploitative Dunmires. Meanwhile, Goody visits the AA support group to find Armand and tells everyone to report to him if they know anything about his whereabouts since he has gone missing. Later, Tyson visits his father and asks him to work in the distillery, but he declines because of the dangers involved in the business. However, Tyson tells him that he will be expecting him on Sunday, and his mother also later advises him to take the job to keep an eye on Tyson, so he agrees. Elsewhere, Mitch and Bigfoot accompany Dwight, and they visit Walden Eustace to reach a distribution deal for their distillery. But Walden is reluctant to accept their offer, so he makes excuses. However, Bigfoot intimidates him, and Dwight assures Walden security from Dunmire in return for his services, making him reluctantly agree. At night, Cole visits Cleo while she is alone at the distillery and claims to have no involvement in her father's death. He then tries to propose to Cleo, claiming himself to be a better option than Mitch, but Cleo says that she would rather die than marry him, and tells him to get lost. The next day, Bevilacqua arrives with his men at the distillery and warns Dwight about the dangers of going against the Dixie crime family. Joanne then offers him the use of their laundry trucks to distribute the liquor, but he demands 50% of their profits, which she rejects, and Dwight only offers him 7.5%, which he believes Bevilacqua will soon accept. Meanwhile, Bevilacqua receives a call from the New York mobster named Vince, who is looking for new opportunities, so Bevilacqua tells him to be alert for any work in Dwight's new booze business. Moments later, Tyson's father joins them at the distillery and starts to fix the plumbing, while Grace asks Bodhi if he is going to make peace with Bevilacqua's mobster who murdered Jimmy, prompting Bodhi to reveal his plan to stalk him on the internet to make his life a living hell. Just then, the mobster comes up to make peace with Bodhi, which he accepts but is still determined to carry on with his plan. Elsewhere, Cole informs Jeremiah about Dwight's visit to Walden Eustace and Bevilacqua's presence in the distillery. Jeremiah thus instructs Cole to harm Dwight's close associates to send him a message, and he visits Walden Eustace to intimidate him into backing down from the deal with Dwight. He leaves, telling his men to beat Walden up before leaving, while Dwight's crew speeds up the renovation of the distillery and eventually produces the first batch of their liquor, which they celebrate. Moments later, Tyson's father communicates his reservations to Tyson over his obsessive materialism, evident from his dress, glasses, and cars. Sometime later, Dwight invites Cal Thresher, who is running for governorship, to his office and offers him his support in the elections in return for future favors. Thresher asks whether Dwight is trying to subdue Dunmire by allying himself with a politician, and Dwight confirms it, along with a few threats to ensure Thresher's loyalty. Later that night, while Cleo is staying at Mitch's house, they hear a car roll in near the house, and when Mitch goes out to check with his gun, he is ambushed by two masked men. He holds his own gun against them before Cleo arrives and helps him out by wounding one of the thugs in his arm, prompting them to run away. Moments later, Cole returns home with an injured arm, claiming that Mitch had a gun, which surprised him. Jeremiah then picks up a branding iron from the bonfire and presses it on Cole's wound as a punishment for his failure to complete his task. Back at Mitch's house, he advises Cleo to leave Tulsa for her safety as he foresees things getting worse, but she is adamant to stand up against the Dunmires as the last living Montague to honor her father's memory. In Bread 2 Buck Saloon, Dwight ignores a call from Agent Musso when Jeremiah arrives to confirm that Dwight has rejected his offer. Dwight sits him down for a talk, while Cole waits outside in his car and sees the waitress named Spencer getting harassed by a man. The man then attacks her, and in a weird twist, Cole rescues her and beats up the guy before leaving. Inside, Jeremiah warns Dwight about his reckless intrusion in a state controlled by the Dunmires for ages and promises serious retribution against the people Dwight cares for. This angers Dwight, prompting him to threaten Dunmire's whole empire, which he claims he would take apart bit by bit. However, Jeremiah is unfazed by Dwight's threats and laughs it off before leaving with a threat to Dwight's own life. The next morning, Dwight and Joanne arrive at the distillery, where Dwight instructs his gang to remain alert, as the Dunmires are actively on their tail. Mitch informs him about Cleo being away to deal with the realtors who are trying to get a hold of her burned-down property, while Tyson wants to hit the Dixie Mafia first, but Dwight thinks it would be wiser to measure the enemy's strength before striking. Just then, he is called by Agent Musso, who orders him to get to 5220 Hoyt Street and follow his instructions for arrival, or else he will arrest his whole crew. Dwight and Bigfoot drive to the location, where Dwight gets into the car waiting for him without telling Bigfoot the details. The car then suddenly drives away, since it's a fully autonomous self-driving car, with an AI voice asking Dwight about his choice of music. It also stops his attempts to force his way out of the car and brings him to Agent Musso, together with whom they drive towards Texas to deal with a dangerous criminal. Meanwhile, at the distillery, Tyson complains about doing manual labor when they should be collecting intelligence on the Dixie Mafia, but Goody dismisses the idea, so Tyson goes on his mission when Goody leaves, prompting Bodie and Grace to follow. Musso drives his car across the country at high speed while questioning Dwight about Armand's whereabouts, which Dwight doesn't know about. He then tells Dwight that his mission is to set up the criminal, Dexter Deacon, also called the Watchmaker, who implants bombs in small devices and kills people recklessly. He thinks Dwight is perfect for the job, as he is himself a criminal, which would help him avoid the suspicion that undercover agents may evoke. Musso then asks him about Ray Renzetti, and Dwight pretends not to know him, but they are suddenly pulled over by the police for speeding. On the other hand, Mitch finds Cleo having a drink at Bread 2 Buck Saloon and asks her to be careful in case the Dunmires decide to strike again. But Cleo appears to be disinterested and burnt out. However, her mood is instantly uplifted when Mitch surprises her with a vintage vehicle in which they went for their first prom. Elsewhere, Musso is about to get a speeding ticket from the police despite showing the officer his FBI badge, but Dwight offers to bargain with the officer and gets out of the vehicle. On the other side, Tyson, Grace, and Bodie wait outside Cole's gym to gather intel on him, and they start to follow him in Tyson's Cybertruck, which Bodie disapproves of because it attracts too much attention. Meanwhile, Dwight bargains with the officer, telling him that he is an FBI informant, and avoids the speeding ticket by promising the officer courtside tickets for him and his sons for the basketball match of their favorite team. On the other hand, Tyson, Grace, and Bodie follow Cole's car to a warehouse, which they decide to break into, but they find it to be a community center with old people playing a game of bingo.
You're gonna have to holster that, son.
So they buy a stack to blend in with the other participants, whereas on the road, Cleo reveals her doubts about Dwight to Mitch, but Mitch convinces her of Dwight's honesty as they decide to go on a long drive to relax. Sometime later, Armand's wife Clara arrives at the distillery as Joanne is asking Bigfoot about Dwight's whereabouts. She wants to talk to Dwight and find out what he has done to Armand since he has gone missing while on his way to meet his children. Joanne emphasizes that Dwight does not know about the affair, as he himself has been looking for Armand. Meanwhile, Dwight and Musso discuss their preferred method of executing terrorists as they drive on. Back in the community center, Grace calls in Goody, who joins their little game of bingo. As Goody observes the game, he reveals that Cole Dunmire is actually running a scam in the name of the community center and has the game rigged to maximize his profits, so they decide to bring down his operation. In Texas, Dwight arrives at the watchmaker's shop with the excuse of getting his watch fixed, but then shows his interest in the watchmaker's criminal business. The watchmaker is skeptical of him, so Dwight shares his name and tells him to look into it before they do business. Elsewhere, Cleo and Mitch stop at a gas station to refuel the car, and Cleo goes to the tuck shop to get some snacks. At the community center, Goody and the others sit with the planted bingo game winners, and Tyson is able to cheat his way to victory. However, Cole denies him his prize until Goody tells him that it will make his business look bad, forcing him to pay up. Back at the gas station, Cleo shoplifts, claiming that it would get her mind off things, and forces Mitch to play along before they resume their long drive. On their way back, Musa reveals that he has a personal vendetta against the watchmaker and that Dwight will have to bring him down. Elsewhere, Cleo drinks heavily as she drives the car, ignoring Mitch's advice, and leading the car towards the Dunmire mansion, where she drifts through the front lawn, leaving tire marks. She then gets out of the car and throws a liquor bottle at the front door, proceeding with a lighter to set it on fire, but the guards arrive to hold her off. Jeremiah Dunmire also comes out, and Cleo claims that she is going to burn down his house just as he burned hers. But Jeremiah smiles and attributes that to an accident. He forgives the damage she caused and tells Mitch to get her off his property before he changes his mind. Meanwhile, Goody and the others celebrate their small victory over Cole at a club where Tyson is taken to a private room. While there, Cole arrives and pulls a gun on him. Later that night, Cleo and Mitch pull up near the Bread 2 Buck, where Mitch scolds Cleo for endangering the lives of the whole crew through her reckless behavior, and warns her that he will leave her if she continues to do so, but she promises to behave. Later, Cole and his men bring Tyson to the docks and beat him up to make him give away the location of the 50-year-old liquor. But Tyson seems firm on not snitching even if he is killed. However, Cole outsmarts him and brings out the stripper, threatening to kill her, making Tyson agree to give away the location. Moments later, Cole steps into the underground storage where the barrels of the vintage liquor are, and he instructs his men to bring trucks to transport them as soon as possible. Tyson is kept locked in his Cybertruck, upon which Cole's goons fire to scare him. At his house, Dwight discusses the possibility of Thresher winning the elections in Oklahoma with Margaret, which she finds unlikely. Thus, Dwight asks her to find an alternative candidate whom he can invest in, or to find a way to change public support in favor of Thresher. Just then, he gets a call from Goody, alerting him about a problem which he discovers to be the theft of the vintage liquor barrels from the Montague storage by the Dunmires. Dwight then checks on a beaten-down Tyson and resolves to take revenge on Jeremiah Dunmire. In the morning, Dwight scolds his crew for retaliating against the Dunmires when he specifically told them not to. He shows disappointment in them for leaving one of their own alone, which he claims goes against their family values. At the same time, Dwight resolves to get the booze back and instructs Bodie to track it down from the website of the Dunmires, whereas Grace is asked to find a high-end wholesaler to sell off the booze quickly, as soon as it is recovered. Although Dwight does not single out Tyson, Bodie and Grace blame him for getting the liquor stolen. Meanwhile, Joanne questions Dwight about his absence during the encounter, but he does not answer her questions. A moment later, Bevilacqua arrives to discover that the liquor has been stolen, with his men killed in the process. He also shares his fear of Armand having been picked up by the feds and the possibility of him snitching on them. But Dwight assures him that Armand isn't a rat. Just then, Bodie brings them the camera footage of the liquor being stolen and loaded into a truck, prompting Dwight and Bevilacqua to track it down. Later, when Tyson goes home, he finds his father at the door, who scolds him for endangering his life, and decides to help him get back the liquor. On the other side, Bevilacqua and Dwight arrive at the house of the truck driver whose car they saw in the video, and Bevilacqua breaks into the house, where he takes the driver at gunpoint before inquiring about the liquor. But the driver draws his gun on him, prompting Bevilacqua to shoot him dead. Elsewhere in New York, Vincent Piazza comes to see Ray Renzetti and informs him about Dwight's move into the liquor business, expecting a reward in return but is instead treated coldly. Meanwhile, at the distillery, Bodie shows the mobster how he is hacking the Dunmire Enterprise website to sabotage their orders and deliveries, prompting the mobster to ask for his help in getting rid of spam orders and calls he is getting. But just then, he gets another spam call, making Grace and Bodie exchange a look. Margaret meets Thresher in a restaurant and tells him that he is not going to win the elections for governorship, as he does not have the vote of the general public. She tries to convince him to hire her to improve his public image, which Thresher assumes would come at the cost of him being indebted to Dwight, but Margaret pretends that she is doing it to get back the shares of her ranch that Thresher owns, rather than for Dwight. Simultaneously, Bodie and Grace are busy designing an AI influencer to promote their liquor. Later at the Dunmire residence, Cole informs Jeremiah that their profits are down by 14% because the Manfredi crew hacked their cloud. But Jeremiah blames him for hiring an incompetent tech team. In his defense, Cole mentions his successful retrieval of the Montague vintage liquor, claiming to have gotten it back for Jeremiah only. He invites him to go along with him to try it out, but Jeremiah denies it. Later at the Bread 2 Buck, Cleo asks Mitch about the status of the stolen liquor and discovers that Dwight and his crew is still looking for it and will clash with the Dunmires to get it back. She thinks it is too dangerous, but Mitch assures her that it has to be done. Meanwhile, Dwight receives a call from Musso, warning him not to engage with the Dixie Mafia because it would derail his mission in Texas. Back in the office, Grace and Bodhi show Joanne their AI-designed influencer named Jasper, whom they intend to use for the promotion of their liquor and convince her of its utility. While waiting outside the community center, Tyson's father tells him that he should be more careful with women as he is part of a criminal crew, and reveals that he himself used to run with a crew, which he later ditched to provide his son a better role model. Moments later, Tyson sees the same dancer from the club getting into and driving away in Cole's car. At the distillery, Margaret arrives and informs Dwight that she has made a deal to attend different social events with Thresher as a couple, to improve his image and his chances of winning the elections. But Dwight warns her that he will fight Thresher if he puts his hands on her, which Margaret finds romantic. Just then, Dwight receives a call from Tyson, informing him that the stripper was in league with Cole, as she is driving Cole's car and might lead them to the location of the liquor. Meanwhile, Grace, Bodhi, and Joanne finalize the AI ad and decide to risk posting it for public engagement. Concurrently, Tyson and his father follow Serenity to the storage house where the liquor is stashed, and Dwight soon arrives with his crew and Bill Bevilacqua. He decides to create a diversion before hitting the Dunmeyers. While inside, Cole invites Jeremiah to be the first to try the 50-year-old whiskey and praises him for recovering it from the Montagues. But Jeremiah tastes it and thanks God for returning the whiskey to its rightful owners, leaving Cole dejected. Moments later, when Cole comes out of the storage to get into the truck carrying the whiskey, he is taken at gunpoint by Bevilacqua and Bigfoot, as Dwight makes his entry with his crew, and demands that Jeremiah return the priced liquor, otherwise he will kill Cole. Jeremiah initially seems reluctant to approve the deal, valuing money over his son's life, which Dwight finds really shocking. But then he gives up when pushed further and lets them drive the truck away with the liquor inside, promising to get back at them soon. Later in bed, Dwight tells Margaret about how things are finally working out for him thanks to the new people in his life, including her, as he despised the world before coming to Tulsa. On the other hand, as Bill Bevilacqua drives at night, he receives a call from Ray Renzetti, whose voice Bevilacqua recognizes, as Ray reveals that he used to work together with Bevilacqua's father and grandfather, and they made a lot of money together. He then tells him that he wants to maintain communications with Bevilacqua, and can give him advice in case he has any problem with anybody, implying that they can work together to take over Dwight's businesses. To which Bevilacqua says okay and cuts off the call. Early in the day, Dwight's crew is busy preparing for the launch event of their Montague 50 bourbon, as Bigfoot is busy carving out a big bourbon bottle out of ice, and Mitch praises Bodhi and Grace for having managed to put together the event, even engaging various stakeholders, including critics from all around Oklahoma. Meanwhile, Dwight is nervous about the launch event while he has his coffee in bed with Margaret, who plans to bring Thresher to the event for PR purposes, but Dwight is not thrilled about it. So Margaret again makes fun of his possessive and jealous nature. Elsewhere, Vince Piazza calls Bevilacqua to inquire about the status of the liquor business, as the news of the launch is everywhere. But Bevilacqua dismisses his nosy attitude despite Vince's claim that it is Ray who wants to know about it. On the other hand, Jeremiah Dunmeyer is getting ready for a meeting when Cole approaches him, wanting to do something about the launch event. However, Jeremiah orders him to gather his men for him and wait outside till he is called for. In his meeting with the state attorney general named A.G. Sackrider, Jeremiah orders him to shut down Dwight's launch event, or else he will make things difficult for the attorney general, whose whole campaign was funded by Jeremiah. Later, Tyson picks up Dwight from his house while in the Bread 2 Buck. Cole comes to check on Spencer and has a drink. They have some small talk, and Spencer gives him a free drink and an invitation to visit her whenever he wants. On the other side, Tyson asks Dwight about his definition of a man as they drive to the distillery, and Dwight assures Tyson that he is a strong man in his eyes and that everybody makes mistakes in their lives, which makes Tyson happy. Moments later, Dwight arrives at the distillery and asks Bodhi for an update on the event, but he is informed by Goody that Bevilacqua is waiting to meet him. So he goes aside and meets Bevilacqua, who informs him that the New York mob is showing great interest in their liquor business, and Ray is trying to turn him against Dwight. However, Dwight's casual attitude prompts Bevilacqua to urge him into action before New York starts a war with them, and reports that one of his drug places recently got raided, which might mean that Armand has snitched on them. When Bevilacqua leaves, Dwight gets a call from the watchmaker, who schedules a meeting with him on the same day despite Dwight claiming to be busy, but the watchmaker deems the time of the meeting non-negotiable. Dwight is not going to meet him, but Musso calls him just then, and convinces him to agree to the meeting by sharing with him the pictures of the victims of the watchmaker's terrorist attacks. Dwight agrees to the meeting and Tyson drives him to the agreed location, which is Bread 2 Buck. On the way, he tells Tyson how life gives you a reality check when you start to think that you have something really special going on. Inside the Bread 2 Buck, the watchmaker waits patiently for Dwight as he arrives and has a bit of vodka before sitting down with him. The watchmaker asks many questions about Dwight's past and current endeavor for research purposes, but Dwight instructs him to come to the point. Eventually, the watchmaker tells him that he can make explosives of different intensities with untraceable materials for him. and demands $250,000 upfront and $250,000 after the job for blowing up the Dunmire mansion. Having no other choice, Dwight is forced to provide him $250,000 from the saloon's safe, after which the watchmaker leaves. Outside, a van arrives and someone inside takes photos of the watchmaker as he gets in his car. Back at the distillery, the launch event begins successfully, but Mitch eyes Bevilacqua's men suspiciously. He then asks Bevilacqua himself if he is planning to do something violent, and Bevilacqua tells him that he will do what is needed to protect his investment. While Joanne waits impatiently for Dwight's arrival to formally start the event, a health inspector arrives for an unexpected HSE inspection, angering Joanne, but Bodhi convinces her to comply as the inspector has the power to shut them down. Subsequently, the inspector asks to start with the barrel room, while Bevilacqua orders Goody to deal with him. Elsewhere, Dwight and Tyson are on their way to the distillery while Margaret is at the event with Thresher. Moments later, as the inspector carries out his work, Goody texts Dwight about the inspection. Outside, Mitch suggests that Cleo say a few words to distract the guests with a speech, while back inside the inspector claims that the barrel room is a health hazard, but Bigfoot sneaks behind the barrels and pushes them over, crushing the inspector under their weight. Mitch is relieved to know that there were no witnesses, while Jeremiah gathers his men to raid the event as the inspector appears to have failed to shut it down. Just then, Dwight and Tyson arrive at the event, and Thresher takes his leave to not be associated with convicted felons. A moment later, Jeremiah and his men raid the event with the Attorney General and the police. He takes the stage to state that he designed the bourbon's formula for Cleo's father, so he owns it. He orders Cole to smash open the barrel of the Montague 50, and his eyes meet Spencer in the crowd as he does this. Chaos ensues, and the entire crew draw their guns on the Dunmires, but the police order them to stand down, while Dunmire leaves with an order to the angry Attorney General to deal with the blowback. The crew is dejected by the event, and Joanne thinks that they are ruined as the media would now paint them as thugs. However, Dwight encourages the crew not to lose hope and start over from tomorrow. And then Goody takes him over to the barrel room to show the inspector's corpse. Dwight decides to treat it like a workplace accident, and let Bodhi discover the corpse in the morning. Later that night, Bevilacqua visits Dwight at his house and questions him about his absence from the event, which Dwight lies about. But Bevilacqua knows that he had a meeting with a stranger at Bread 2 Buck, thus he proceeds to imply that Dwight might have been involved in the raid on his place and is snitching on him. This angers Dwight and he pulls a gun on Bevilacqua for calling him a rat, but Bevilacqua calmly tells him that Dwight would have killed him if he were being dishonest with him, thus he should try seeing things from his perspective too. Bevilacqua then leaves, and as Dwight closes the door, Joanne comes down and sees him with a gun, prompting her to ask questions about it. But Dwight refuses to give any answers, saying he will explain it later. Meanwhile, 2 black vehicles intercept Bevilacqua's car as he is driving back home, and a SWAT team comes out to arrest him on the spot. At the breakfast table, Joanne inquires Dwight about Bevilacqua's visit last night, and Dwight explains to her that he is being forced by federal agents to help them catch a criminal, due to which Bevilacqua is becoming suspicious of him. However, he assures her that they need to continue moving forward to maintain their momentum as they are close to success. Meanwhile, the police investigate the inspector's death in the distillery, and Bodhi asks Mitch why he was the one to discover the body. Mitch tells him that they planned it this way because he was the least suspicious and the police might see it as an accident and not shut them down. However, they still seal the distillery until the cause of the accident is found out, and Cole drives by to ensure that things are going their way. Later that day, Dwight briefs his crew at the Bread 2 Buck, telling them he will use his connections to sell their bourbon illegally to special clients to keep things running till they are reopened for business, after which they will start selling it nationwide, making a lot of profit. He then asks Cleo and Mitch to visit his friend named Johnny Wednesday in Shreveport, while Goody informs him of Bevilacqua's disappearance and inquires what happened between them last night. However, Dwight says that nothing bad happened and thinks that the New York mob might have targeted him because he declined to join them, thus deciding to contact Ray Renzetti. Later, Dwight calls Ray and they use their code language to set up a meeting at Hot Springs in Arkansas, and Dwight instructs Tyson and Bigfoot to get ready for the journey. Meanwhile, Bodhi, Mitch, Cleo, and Grace acquire a couple of cars with dealer plates, and they break into the shuttered distillery, knocking out the guards and filling the cars with liquor bottles, which they set out to sell. On the other hand, in the Dunmire mansion, the Attorney General happily reports to Jeremiah that they managed to seal the distillery and also put a tracker on Dwight's car. But an unimpressed Jeremiah lashes out at the Attorney General, ordering him to destroy Dwight by making the seal on the distillery permanent. Jeremiah also mocks Cole for wearing an unearned camouflage shirt in his office, unlike his elder brother who served in Kandahar with distinction. He then urges Cole to bring down Dwight by any means necessary, if he wants to make him proud. Elsewhere, Dwight and Tyson are on their way to Arkansas by road when Cole's men use the tracker to identify their car and get orders to take him out. One of Bevilacqua's mobsters named Art calls Bodhi as he and Grace drive across states to deliver liquor, questioning him about Bevilacqua's disappearance. but Bodhi claims to be oblivious about the matter. At the same time, Bevilacqua makes a lot of noise in his interrogation cell, demanding food, while Musso waits outside quietly. On the other hand, Cleo is doubtful of their success as they travel to Shreveport, but Mitch still has faith and tells her how he struggled a lot to establish a bar after he came out of prison. And then Dwight came into his life and changed the bar into a full-fledged saloon to bread to buck. Just then, an officer on a bike signals them to pull over, whereas Dwight notifies Bigfoot about Cole's thugs, whom he ambushes from behind when they try to enter a gas station shop to attack Dwight and Tyson. He beats both the thugs unconscious and they set out again on their journey. While Cole watches in frustration from another nearby gas station, the officer commands Cleo and Mitch to leave their car and gives them Cole's greetings. At the same time, Cole informs Jeremiah about the successful interception of Mitch and Cleo trying to secretly transport bourbon across states, but Jeremiah tells him to call only when he brings down Dwight. In Arkansas, Dwight and company check into a big hotel where the meeting with Ray is scheduled, and in their suite, Tyson remarks that Ray looks weak, but Dwight tells him that he is a very dangerous man who has run the mob for 26 years, and his enemies eventually end up dead. Meanwhile, Mitch and Cleo are handcuffed together by the officer, but they attack him while he is busy checking the car's trunk, knocking him out and stealing the keys to open their handcuffs. They also take away the keys to his bike and slash its tire before driving away. On the other hand, Grace worries about Bevilacqua's disappearance and the danger it may pose, but Bodhi assures her that the money they make is worth it, due to which he supports Dwight. Moments later, Cleo and Mitch arrive at their destination, which is Caddo Parish, and find Johnny Wednesday running a small church. He welcomes them and hands them the money at the door and tells them to say hello to Dwight while his men quickly unload the bourbon from the vehicle. Back at the hotel, Ray arrives with his men and waits in the reception area for a couple of minutes before entering the restaurant and meeting Dwight as they sit down at a table. Just then, Dwight notices Vince sitting at another table in their view and questions why he is there, so Ray informs him that Vince is now working for him. Vince comes up to meet Dwight, but he dismisses him, so he returns to his table. As they start their meeting, Cole arrives at the hotel and has a drink at the bar, keeping an eye on Dwight. Ray then asks Dwight about the liquor business and demands a share in it, but Dwight claims that he has partners to look after. However, Ray does not care about his partners and demands an 80% share of the business, while also not answering Dwight's questions about his involvement in Bevilacqua's disappearance. As they are busy in their heated argument, Cole and his men put on masks and start firing at Dwight, making them take cover behind the table. One of Ray's men is shot as he himself escapes with the rest of his men, while blaming Dwight for the attack, which Dwight denies, while Cole also runs away. Elsewhere, Cleo and Mitch take a break at a diner after a day of travel. On the other hand, Goody informs Dwight that the police found Armand dead in a flophouse, and to add to the problems, Ray does not respond to Dwight's calls, giving Dwight reason to believe a war has begun. At the Bread 2 Buck Casino, Dwight receives a call from an unknown number which turns out to be Ray. Ray is furious about the recent attack, but Dwight quickly explains that it was not him. Ray then reveals that he had been prepared to negotiate, but believes Dwight sabotaged any potential agreement by bringing up Bill. He demands 80% of the liquor business, which Dwight rejects as unreasonable. Dwight instead explains his plan to expand the operation into clubs, hotels, and retail outlets, and proposes an alternative deal in which Ray provides him access to alcohol distribution across the Northwest. Seeing the long-term profit, Ray ultimately accepts the deal and hangs up. Dwight tells his men their priority is to get the seal off the distillery, and he heads to the lawyer's office with Bigfoot. Before going in, Bigfoot reminds Dwight about the metal detectors, so he leaves his gun with Bigfoot outside. He heads into the office of Attorney General Sackrider, who believes that Dwight is here to deliver a message to Dunmire, as Dunmire is the boss of this area. However, Dwight offers to make a path for Sackrider if he restores the liquor license, saying that the first time he goes somewhere, he makes the most favorable proposition, after which he isn't as friendly. Sackrider tries to tell Dwight that he doesn't know Dunmire's potential, but Dwight reassures him that he is well aware. Meanwhile, Cole Dunmire is sitting in his car when Spencer joins him. He tells her that sometimes he does wrong things for his father's approval, yet his father remains angry with him. Spencer tells him that she is already risking her life by being with him, and he confesses that he really likes her. At Bread 2 Buck, Tyson asks Goody what his first hustle was, and Goody reveals that he robbed a shoe store and tells Tyson to become a fake cop who steals from bad and gives to good people. He explains that he once robbed a joint and they couldn't report it or get back at him. He tells Tyson to look into the drug market of colleges, and Spencer arrives for her shift, so Tyson tells her that he has a business proposal for her. Dwight calls Margaret, asking if she has any connections in the Attorney General's office, and she reveals that she knows his wife. On the other hand, Spencer takes Goody and Tyson to the college frat house that supplies drugs to the campus. Tyson is ready to barge in, but Goody tells him to wait as they need to know whether they have a guard dog or not, how many men it houses, and the way to the basement. Elsewhere, Margaret goes to meet Sackrider's wife Anna and soon realizes that Anna has been having troubles with her marriage. Margaret steps outside to tell Dwight about Sackrider's gambling addiction. Later they head to Thresher, and Dwight tells him that Sackrider isn't ready to cooperate with them, but Thresher refuses to help them, saying that he wouldn't compromise his political position by pressuring Dunmire's guy. However, Margaret tells him to think of Sackrider as a governor's guy and bring him on Thresher's team, as that can put him on top. The next day, Goody and Tyson get fake police badges, and once Spencer reveals the route to the basement, telling them that there are 6 men in the house right now, they head inside, where they quickly force all the men to their knees and tie them. After stealing the drugs and the money, they leave, and Spencer asks for her cut, but they tell her that she will be the one selling the drugs. She tells them that she knows every bartender and DJ in the city, feeling confident that she can sell these within 10 minutes. Elsewhere, Sackrider goes to meet Thresher at a casino and wonders why Thresher chose this place. Dwight and his men observe the two from the monitoring room and quickly send Grace with a few casino chips when he notices that Thresher is openly bribing Sackrider, which he refuses but becomes excited at the idea of gambling. Mitch suddenly notices Dunmire in the parking lot, so Dwight and Bigfoot head out to deal with him. Dunmire reveals that Sackrider called him about Dwight's proposition, but Dwight says that he expected that much. He tells Dunmire to read a book called The Art of War and warns him that people change overnight, but Dunmire is confident that he governs the city's law. He threatens to kill Dwight if he tries to mess with his people before leaving. Meanwhile, Sackrider excitedly gambles and manages to win, but Dwight sends out Grace to change the dice, who secretly does that. He begins to lose and starts getting frustrated, but Grace jumps in to give him extra gambling chips, making him happy. However, Thresher realizes that Sackrider might blame him for losing the money and heads to Dwight and Margaret, soon realizing that he was played by them, as they knew about his gambling addiction. On the other side, Jeremiah asks Cole why he fails so much, humiliating him and disgracing the family legacy. Cole says that Jeremiah doesn't care about his own son, but Jeremiah doesn't stop and continues berating him. Back at Bread 2 Buck, Sackrider is devastated, as he has lost a lot of money and is now in debt to the casino. Dwight tells him that he is the owner, and Sackrider worriedly explains that he doesn't have enough money to pay off the debts. Dwight tells him he is willing to forego the debt, saying that he will have Sackrider's back if he agrees to be on his side. Sackrider has no choice because of his desperate situation. Dwight sends Jeremiah Dunmire the Art of War book with "You Lost" inscribed on it. He rushes to the Attorney General's office and angrily asks Sackrider if he restored Dwight's license. Sackrider says that the distillery was clear, so he had no reason to keep it closed, which makes Jeremiah ask how much Dwight is paying him. Sackrider says he isn't getting a penny and only serves the people of Oklahoma, but Jeremiah says that Sackrider serves him. However, Sackrider isn't scared, as he says he now has stronger protectors. This makes Jeremiah lose control and start beating Sackrider, while he desperately calls for security. Jeremiah is taken away and thrown into prison, but he believes that setbacks are necessary to see the path better. Dwight now regains the license and heads inside the distillery, while Dunmire is released from jail and Cole comes to pick him up. Once they reach the house, they find the watchmaker Dexter Deacon standing right in front of the door. So Jeremiah's bodyguards aim a gun at Dexter, and he admits that he was sent here to kill Jeremiah. Jeremiah takes him inside his office, where Dexter reveals that he doesn't consider Dwight trustworthy and is bothered by the fact that Dwight outrightly hates him. Dexter says that he will kill Dwight, but wants Jeremiah to deal with the people associated with Dwight. Jeremiah tells Cole to leave, and then he tells Dexter he showed up at the perfect time. Meanwhile, in a fundraising event for Thresher at the Delmer Grand Hotel, Margaret is handling all the preparations and gets a call from Dwight, where she tells him that if all goes well tonight, they will have the future governor on their side. Dexter shows up at the venue and sneakily plants explosives in the open bar before quickly leaving. On the other hand, Joanne asks Dwight if he is going to the fundraising event, but Dwight reveals that he wasn't invited. Suddenly, he gets a call from Dexter, who is about to invite him to a gas station, but Dwight quickly cuts him off, saying he will decide the time and the location. Dwight texts him the address and tells Mitch to call Bigfoot, as they'll be needing backup. Dwight informs Musso that Dexter called him, but Musso tells him that he needs to set up a team, but Dwight says they don't have time for that. Meanwhile, Spencer and Tyson decide they'll hold a party and head to Bodie to get a venue. Tyson explains that they can't do this at Bread 2 Buck and that they have enough drugs to get them a large sum of money, but Bodie questions if Dwight is aware of it, which he isn't. Tyson eventually convinces him, and Bodie sets the condition that they'll give him his cut. Elsewhere, Dwight states that he is fully aware that Musso is a federal agent, and that Musso took Bevilacqua, but deliberately framed it to appear as though Dwight was responsible. Musso tries to explain himself, but Dwight tells him to just release Bevilacqua and get him out of the mess he created. However, Musso refuses to release him because he believes he is an aimless gangster. They start heading to Dexter, and on the way, Musso explains that Dwight will step back after handing money, as the backup team will do the rest, but Dwight suggests they kill him on the scene, as Dexter killed Musso's partner and 20 civilians in an explosion, but Musso tells him to follow the law. Once they reach the location, Musso hands Dwight a recording wire, which Dwight reluctantly puts in his pocket. Dwight drops Musso near the backup and heads inside alone, where he throws the recording wire. He heads inside and shows Dexter the money, but Dexter points a gun at Dwight, making him question what's wrong. Dexter is about to explain when Mitch and Bigfoot show up and take his weapon away. After that, they drag him out through the back door and leave without Musso knowing. On the other hand, the event has started and Thresher questions what Dwight really wants from him, but Margaret says she doesn't know. He accuses her of being a mafia mole and tells her to be prepared because Dwight might be saved, but no one will come to help them if things go down. Elsewhere, Musso hears no sound from Dwight's recording wire, so he heads inside the building with his team, only to find that they've long left the area. Dwight and the rest reach a hidden cabin and drag Dexter inside with the intention of torturing him for the sake of information. Dexter questions whether he can be released, but Dwight says he will be killed after answering a few questions. Cole asks Jeremiah what he talked about with Dexter, and Jeremiah reveals that Dwight hired Dexter to bomb their house, but believes events shifted course, as now a few people won't make it out of their hotel, which worries Cole about Spencer. He quickly heads to the party where Spencer is selling the drugs, and she quickly signals him to head out. She scolds him for coming here, but he tells her that his father talked about hurting a lot of people close to Dwight inside a hotel, so she quickly goes to get Tyson. She explains the situation to him and heads out to find Cole, but realizes that he has left. Elsewhere, Dwight tortures Dexter and eventually tells his men to take him out to finish him, but he gets a call from Tyson, quickly realizing that Dexter has set a bomb in the Delmer Hotel. He calls Musso and makes Dexter confess to the crime, after which Mitch and Bigfoot put Dexter inside a casket and push him into a grave. Musso heads there with a team while Margaret convinces important personnel to support Thresher. They reach the venue 6 minutes before the bomb goes off and barge in to evacuate the area. Dwight quickly finds Margaret and tells her to leave as they only have 2 minutes left. Mitch leaves last after making sure everyone is out, and just as he steps out of the building, the bomb goes off. People fall to the ground and Dwight embraces Margaret, feeling relieved that they're all safe. On the other hand, Cole heads back home to Jeremiah, who reveals that he heard about the chaos at the governor's party, telling Cole that everything always works according to his plan. Back at the venue, Musso tells Dwight to tell him where Dexter is, but Dwight refuses, saying he has had a long night and would rather discuss this in the morning. Musso agrees to talk about it later, and Dwight leaves the site with his men. In Newark, New Jersey, a feared hitman named Russell Lee Washington finally reappears in Tulsa. He sits inside a minivan which is in a parking lot and observes a cafe. He eventually heads inside, saying he is from the Sterling Property Management to check the fire alarm, but the cashier says that he hasn't been informed about the visit, so Russell pretends that he will come later, knowing that the cashier will let him in, fearing that fines might be imposed on the cafe. He heads to the security room and quickly disables all the cameras before taking the elevator to the 5th floor, where he discreetly enters an apartment. He shoots the man watching TV, and then shoots him twice more to make sure he is dead. After doing his job successfully at the Barclay Hotel, he heads back to his shop where he poses as an electrician working for the RR Electric Supply. Vince visits him, and Russell isn't happy about it, as he finished the job. However, Vince tells him that Ray wants to meet Russell in person. Russell goes to Ray and tells him that he only took this assassination job because of Ray. But now he is finished, as he has done more than what he owed. However, Ray tells him that he needs to do one last job, after which he is free to quit. He tells him to assassinate Dwight because he has no loyalty, but Russell refuses, so Ray reminds him that he doesn't have a choice. The next morning, Musso visits Dwight's distillery to ask him about Dexter's location, but Dwight tells him not to ask this again and again, as Dexter was a low-priority case that isn't going to return. However, he reveals that he recorded all the information Dexter provided, but will only give the recording to Musso if he gets them a federal liquor license. Joanne shows up and Dwight leaves with her, lying that Musso is a liquor salesman. They dispatch and supply their alcohol to the entire town, replacing the Dunmire distilleries. The Dunmire liquor is returned to their factory, and Cole is shocked to see this as his employees report that they've been dropped by many of their regular shops. Meanwhile, Russell arrives at Bread 2 Buck and sits at the bar while Tyson tells Dwight about his business adventure with Spencer. Leaving out the details of selling drugs, Russell goes to Dwight's table, who is happy to see Russell and tells him about the distillery. He questions why he is in Tulsa, and Russell says that he is on his way to New Orleans. However, Dwight tells him that Tulsa isn't on the way, so Russell must have another reason for coming here. Dwight realizes that Ray has hired Russell to kill him, but Russell says that if he was going to do the hit, they wouldn't be having this conversation right now. They both put their guns on the table, and Dwight explains that denying Ray's order can have serious consequences. Dwight invites Russell to dinner, but he refuses, saying he has work to do before leaving. Goody joins Dwight and is suspicious that Russell might attack, but Dwight is sure that Russell is a man of honor. They decide to spread the word all around so they can be informed if any tourist comes to Tulsa. On the other hand, Tyson visits Bodie with his cut and tells him that their drug selling has shown great potential, but he isn't getting any free drugs from the frat houses anymore, as they've caught up on him being a fake cop. He asks Bodie for a supplier, so Bodie reluctantly agrees to get the drugs for Tyson. Elsewhere, Russell gets a call from Ray, who reminds him how important the job is, but Russell tells him that he's not going to do it. making Ray angrily threaten to kill him and throw his body on the streets. Back at the Montague distillery, Joanne is busy with the work when Grace shows up and tells her that she wants to learn from her, so Joanne welcomes her. Meanwhile, Cole goes to Jeremiah's office and tells him that they've lost 6 distributors, as Montague has signed a deal with them for a national launch. Jeremiah becomes angry and heads to his home, where he breaks things with an axe before crying, which shakes Cole as well. Later at night, Mitch tells Dwight that another tourist from New York has reached Tulsa and reveals the location of the inn where he is staying. After that, Margaret comes to Bread 2 Buck to tell Dwight that she can't join him for dinner tonight, as Thresher is holding a meeting with the Fraternal Order of Police. Dwight teases her that he feels assured that so many cops are going to protect his girlfriend. Dwight heads home and starts working on a puzzle when Russell shows up at his house with a silenced gun. He rings the bell and Dwight heads there with his gun but calms down after seeing that it's Russell. Inside, Dwight praises him, saying he came to take Dwight's life for the second time within one day, but made the strong decision not to do it. Dwight tells him not to take Ray seriously and head home to his family. Dwight also reveals that Ray has sent out another hitter from New York to target both of them, and they head to the location Mitch told them about. On the other hand, at another rave party organized by Tyson, a man notices Spencer handing out the drugs and sends security there. The security tells them that they can't sell drugs here and that they should leave. But Spencer and Tyson act oblivious, saying that they've done nothing wrong. The security guard tries to force them out, so Spencer offers him a cut, but he kicks them out. Elsewhere, Dwight and Russell reach the inn, and Russell realizes that Dwight has no practice in assassination, as he doesn't mind being in the direct line of attack or being suspicious to the police. Russell explains that a dead person gains immense weight, making the movie scenes of people dragging 2 dead bodies impossible. They discuss the possible room of the assassin, and Russell says that he would have chosen room 211, which is near the stairs, so he can get to the car quicker, but Dwight says he thinks the hitman is in room 209. Suddenly, the hitman steps out of room 209, proving Dwight correct. However, before they can celebrate, another man comes out of room 211. They think Ray has sent 2 hitmen because Russell was staying in room 210 and they had surrounded him. Once the 2 return to their rooms, Dwight and Russell head in and shoot them dead. Meanwhile, Cleo visits Mitch after she learns about the bomb at Delmer, and they embrace each other at the distillery. Joanne wakes up when she hears a sound and is kidnapped by one of Dunmire's men. Late at night, Dunmire's thugs drive Joanne as a hostage to his mansion, where Jeremiah welcomes her, while blaming Dwight for her situation. The next morning, Margaret informs Dwight about Thresher's popularity in the polls and his offer of an advisory position for her in his administration. So Dwight asks her to reject the offer. However, Margaret insists on the utility of having someone in the government before she leaves for work. Dwight then looks for Joanne in the house but is not able to find her, and his crew checks the distillery but fails to find her there as well. Mitch informs him that they found the distillery doors unlocked and the cameras disabled as Dwight rushes towards the distillery. A moment later, Jeremiah calls Dwight from a private line, asking him what he would choose between his sister and the distillery, and both exchange death threats before cutting the call. Eventually, Dwight arrives at the Bread 2 Buck and briefs his men about the war they are about to have with Dunmire's, while giving Mitch a list of weapons to acquire for the event. On the other hand, Jeremiah offers Joanne some tea and tries to convince her to sign over the distillery to him to avoid the violence that would occur otherwise, but she refuses to do so. Outside, Cole arrives but is turned away by Jeremiah's goons. Elsewhere, Russell Lee arrives at the local car dealership and chooses a Cadillac for purchase, whereas Cole finds Joanne tied up in Jeremiah's office when he is away. He frees her and gives her some water while advising her to sign over the distillery as Dwight already has many assets. However, Joanne claims that Jeremiah still may harm her and that Dwight would certainly retaliate. At the Bread 2 Buck, Russell Lee finds Dwight in a tense mood and volunteers to help him in rescuing Joanne despite Dwight's advice for him to leave Tulsa before Ray finds him. While at the weed dispensary, Bodie instructs his cashier to keep the shop open in case Joanne tries to take refuge there and gives him a gun for safety. Just then, Cole arrives and asks to speak to Dwight, claiming to know where Jeremiah is holding Joanne. Back at the Bread 2 Buck, Bigfoot introduces his newly recruited and powerfully built cousins to Dwight and Russell, while the crew acquires military-grade weapons from an illegal guns dealer, Rickett the Cricket. Later at an event, Thresher asks Margaret to accept his offer before his governorship changes his mind and even agrees to give her a say in policymaking. Meanwhile, Jeremiah has supper with Joanne at the table and tells her about his elder son Joshua's sacrifice for his country, but lashes out and flings the food everywhere when she questions him about his regrets. At the Bread 2 Buck, Mitch discusses the assault tactics with the rest when Spencer arrives with Cole, claiming that he is there to help. The crew is initially skeptical of him, but Spencer reminds them that he saved many people, including Margaret, from the hotel explosion. So Dwight orders him to draw a detailed map of the mansion and Joanne's location. Meanwhile, Jeremiah becomes increasingly restless, waiting for Dwight's response and carries around an axe in his office to scare Joanne. Elsewhere, Thresher gives his victory speech as governor, whereas at the Bread 2 Buck, Dwight and the crew plan out their assault in advance, assigning Russell to the left side of the mansion. Dwight to the right, while Mitch, Bigfoot, and his cousins are tasked with frontal assault, and Goody is instructed to stay behind to run the operations in case of any mishap. At midnight, the crew drives towards the Dunmire mansion, while Spencer consoles Cole, telling him that he did the right thing. At 3 a.m., the crew reaches the mansion and surrounds it, while Dunmire puts more pressure on Joanne to sign the papers. Moments later, the Man Freddy crew opens fire on the mansion, blowing up the guards outside the house with frag grenades and firing tear gas shells into the mansion. They then start taking out the Dunmire goons left and right in the mansion as Russell and Dwight team up to clear out the house while wearing gas masks. Meanwhile, Jeremiah throws Joanne to the floor and grabs his shotgun from a rack, which he uses to fire at Dwight coming down the stairs but misses narrowly. Jeremiah then throws away the empty shotgun and runs out of the house through the back door, while Dwight finds Joanne and asks Mitch to escort her to safety as he himself pursues Jeremiah. When Russell comes out of the building, he sees some Dunmire goons running away and shoots them down, whereas Dwight finds Jeremiah hiding in his outhouse, where he tackles him to the ground and starts beating him up until he has subdued him. He then ties Jeremiah up to a pole and compares him to the basilisk lizard that walks on water by creating little bubbles which burst when he makes a mistake, sinking him in the water. And he sets him on fire to avenge Theodore Montague while he walks away. Later, the whole crew celebrates at the Bread to Buck, and Russell reveals his plan of leaving for New Orleans and starting something new there like Dwight before saying his farewell. Dwight then sees Agent Musso in the saloon and excuses himself to go to his office, where Musso gives him a federal permit for selling alcohol, which he claims is especially or almost impossible to get, so Dwight should be thankful to him. In return, Dwight hands him the USB drive having all the confessions and crimes of the watchmaker Dexter, and Musso asks about the body of the watchmaker, which Dwight claims does not concern him as it will never be found. Musso leaves and Dwight comes out to rejoin Margaret. So they sit down together while Mitch is playing his guitar and singing a song up on the stage for everyone's pleasure. And that's the complete breakdown of Season 3. Let me know if there are other series or movie franchises you'd like recapped. And as always, stay awesome and I'll see you on the next one.